Welcome back to Highly Respected. I'm your host, Scott Gray, and today this is a special episode because there's going to be two welcome backs delivered today. I recorded this episode earlier this week because, sometimes I had to do some highly respected traveling this week. And there were some topics that came up that I had to address after I recorded the episode. Namely, just really one topic. Namely, Trump getting reinstated back on Twitter. And I had to do a clarification of another topic that I did later on in this podcast. So we're going to have two welcome backs. But I just recorded this segment to do as an addendum to the podcast, even though it's coming before. So it's more like a prelude to the podcast. But anyway, I just wanted to briefly talk about Trump getting reinstated back on a Twitter before we go into our normal episode. It's very good. Well, let's get this out of the way. The first thing to say about this is it's very good that Trump is back. We were hoping that this would be one of the big things that Elon Musk would do if he took over Twitter, and guess what? He did it. So that's great news, obviously, that he's doing that. And I think it is good for us that we would have Trump back on, that he can bring back the energy that he always had, and the Twitter, the bad times are the bad times of post-Trump Twitter. I think in a lot of ways that even if he's on there and people don't like Trump, he adds to the conversation. He creates new discourse. He usually gets a lot of our ideas out there, or he can suggest new ideas, stuff like him bringing up what's happening in South Africa or things like that, or even just commenting on the news. So it's all good, and he's been doing that on Truth Social. Some of his stuff on Truth Social is a little too unchained, you might say. But I think if he brings back that energy to Twitter, it'll be all good. The one thing that it's hard to speak a lot about is that whether he comes back or not. And one thing is that he's under contract with Truth Social, that he has an exclusivity deal with Truth Social that I read, where he can't post anything on another platform before he posts on Truth Social, and there has to be a 6-hour delay between what he posts on Truth Social and what he posts on Twitter. And what we may get for the time being is that he's going to post something on Truth Social, and then we're going to have to wait 6 hours for him to repost it. Not ideal, but, the things he's posted on Truth Social are sometimes really good. I think they have a higher word count on Truth Social than they do on Twitter, so we might not get... he might not be able to repost it exactly as he did on Truth Social, but we'll see some interesting things with that. He did give a weird remarks about getting reinstated on Twitter. He is at, I think it was the Republican Jewish... committee conference, something like that, and he's there, and he's like doing a live broadcast, and they're like, there's a poll out saying you're going to be reinstated on Twitter. What do you think about that? He's like, I'm on Truth Social. Truth Social has a lot of power, a lot of great things for Israel. It's like very strong for Israel, and I guess it's like him speaking to the audience. It's very typical Trump comments. What he's doing is like Truth Social, high engagement. They're saying it's better engagement than Twitter, but I like that what Elon's doing. So he goes on this. He's gonna have to come back on posting on Twitter, because you're running a presidential campaign. You can't run a presidential campaign from a fourth-rate platform that the only reason people are on that platform is because you're on there. He's gonna have to go back to Twitter. I don't know how he's going to get out of that contract, obligations, but and I think that there's also a chance that he might be allowed back on Facebook. And so all these things are going to be, connected to his presidential run and getting out his campaign message, and being stuck on Truth Social is not how he's going to be there. So I think it's great news that he's back on Twitter. This is what we always wanted. One of the things we always wanted for Elon Musk to do. Elon Musk has been welcoming back a lot of different people that have been banned. ALX, who was like a right-wing Trump personality type who had viral content, he's been welcomed back. Andrew Tate's been welcomed back. There's a bunch of characters being welcomed back. He keeps insisting that Alex Jones is not going to be welcomed back, but we'll see whether that will hold. I always said Alex Jones would be one of the test cases, and Alex Jones is one of the personalities listed by the ADL as someone that they did not want back. So was Andrew Tate. They did mention Trump, obviously, and the ADL was not happy about Trump being reinstated, but Trump's such a big deal that, that one exception. And it was a Twitter poll, as Elon Musk liked to point out. But Tate has already been allowed back, even though the ADL mentioned him. ADL mentioned a bunch of different people. They mentioned Nick Fuentes, Bannon, David Duke. I don't think David Duke is going to be allowed back. A couple of different people who are also in that category of people that they were specifically singling out. The fact that he allowed back Tate is interesting. I think he's the only one of those people the ADL specifically mentioned by name when Elon fully bought back the platform and were part of their concerns. So we'll see what he does next. I think for most part, looking what Elon has done with Twitter, it's made it better. He's firing a lot of people. That's good. Most of these people are leftists. He's showing that they can work on a smaller staff. There's fewer content moderators, so there's probably going to be a greater degree of free speech now, as I always said. And they've brought Trump back, but Trump needs to start posting again for it to really kick in for that positivity. So we'll keep monitoring that, but I wanted to ensure that this podcast addressed that topic. And it's first in the prelude, the podcast prelude to the rest of the episode. And another thing is, this is a clarification, is that I do a segment on Giorgia Meloni's, or Giorgia, I don't know how to pronounce it. Who gives a shit about these names? We should pronounce them as English names, as like Giorgia, whatever, however pronunciation we want for her name, it should be correct. But Meloni had this viral clip. We were talking about French neocolonialism in Africa, and I talked about this clip as if it had happened last week. It, in fact, is apparently a clip from 2019 or earlier. So that is something that I need to point out, that it is not when I was initially addressing it. But the point still stands, so I just needed to point that out in the podcast prelude before we get to that topic. But that topic on Meloni is not it's well into the podcast, so you guys are gonna have to stick around a long time to listen to that segment. So that is it for the podcast prelude, and now we're gonna get back to the regular episode where you're gonna hear me say welcome back again. Welcome back to Highly Respected. I'm your host, Scott Greer, and today we're going to have an incredible episode that was supposed to be the IQ supplement last week, but things changed, and I decided that it would be better if we had the episode this week, since there's just so much to talk about. And there hasn't been too much news on the horizon, so we might as well talk about this discussion. And what I'm going to talk about today is not just Trump v. DeSantis, which is the promised topic that I said last week, but it's in general how the 2024 Republican primary will operate and the election itself will operate. So these are the things that are coming into fruition here that I need to discuss and what they're going to look like. And it's based on Trump's announcement that he is officially running for president. And, when that happened, a lot of people said it's a little bit of a low energy speech last week. I have to agree. It was a bit of a low energy speech. Content was fine. Maybe not too much red meat, but, he's trying to give a dignified address that hits most of the notes. Said good things about immigration. We talked about some of the political persecutions going on. Some of the things, he could have hit harder on. But this was a speech given to the nation, trying to sound like he is not this crazy old man, and maybe, show that he's still leader of the party, which he's, having to fight for now. Sometimes he got a little bit enthusiastic. He's talking about running. He's like, we're going to win. We're going to run. And then he's like, don't you like that? He went into some of these moments where he had some energy, but usually he's always been this way when it's not before a large rally audience. When he's before a rally crowd and they're going back and forth with him and he can hear which lines are getting applause, which aren't, he really feeds off that energy. And when he's in a more dignified audience or a more dignified situation, a little bit higher brow crowd, you could say, or maybe a setting, he doesn't have that type of energy. But I think, people will be like, this is a sign that he's done. Obviously not. Maybe, it was not quite the high energy performance we got when he announced in 2015 after riding down the escalator, but not everything can equal that performance. I don't think you guys should be too given up on Trump as is on the speech. But the speech in itself is not that important. What is important is how the Republican Party is reacting to Trump. So, I was talking about, in prior episodes and tweets, how if Republicans win the Senate majority, all of this will be underwater, water under the bridge. No reason that all the hysteria was overwrought. They'll come back down to earth with Trump. But everyone is still blaming Trump, and it's only kind of increased. Even after Trump's endorsement, there's some surprising lack of support for Trump coming from various sectors. One, there's a lot of these evangelicals who were supportive of Trump in 2016 are not wanting to support him this time. Some of them, I think, only supported him when it came into the general election. I was trying to find out some of these people that they interviewed. There was some guy like Mike Evans and some other evangelicals who I think may have only supported Trump in the general elections, not the primary part that were not there. But there was one person, Robert Jeffries, who supported Trump, who was very important to Trump in the primary in 2016. Who's withholding his support. Not saying that he's opposed to Trump. He's just saying he doesn't want to get involved in the primary. He will happily endorse Trump if he's the nominee. At the same time, he shared his endorsement of Mike Pence's new book that comes out, which is interesting moment. But Robert Jeffries is still insisting that he likes Trump and would happily vote for him again. He just doesn't want to publicly endorse him for the primary, which, maybe he feels that he's in a more powerful position that he wants to take all people who are coming in. And maybe he's not as certain that Trump will win the primary. But it's not a sign that he's given up on Trump entirely. But that is just like a one sign that's showing how much I said lack of support, but that's not the best term. But this hostility towards Trump and the feeling that he is a weak and that the moment to strike is now for a lot of Republicans. And the battle for the primary, I would say that it was going to be Trump versus DeSantis, and that's what most people think. But it's actually going to be a wide open primary because everybody wants to get in now. You have to realize that there has been 8 years of Republicans, or well, not 8 years yet, but 8 years come 2024. Of Republicans waiting to run for office. And they don't want to wait another 4 years. And so there's a lot of Republicans who built up national reputations, who have built up strong relationships with donors, even their own little local grassroots effort, or maybe there's strong support from a faction. And they are tired of waiting. Because in politics, it's tough to wait. You can wait forever. Maybe it's like, oh, this is not my time to strike. This is not my time to run. And generally when that happens is most people regret waiting rather than say, wow, that was a smart decision to not wait, or a smart decision to wait. Like think about in 2012, Chris Christie, he chose to wait till 2016. In 2012, he looked like a strong contender, could have been the nominee, and people were practically begging him to run. He chose not to, wanted to wait out till 2016. 2016, he got blown out. Finished dead last in the only primary he competed in, and that was in New Hampshire. And he's planning on running again this time. And so that's one example. And there's even examples of Elizabeth Warren. Her time to run probably would have been in 2016. Her challenging Hillary at that time probably would have made her a very formidable candidate. She chose to wait. Didn't do so well in 2020. There's just so many other examples of people who chose to wait and then they realized that their opportunity was gone. And generally with these politicians, a lot of them feel like this is their last hurrah. Like this is the last time they can run. And I think this is the same with Chris Christie. This is the same with Pence. This is the same with Pompeo. This is the same with Nikki Haley, because with Haley, with a lot of these candidates, they're no longer in office. People are going to forget about them by 2028. Think about all these people who ran in 2016. They're like, who? Like George Pataki ran in 2016. Like it was all these guys who should have run in like 2008 or 2012. People like Bobby Jindal. I wouldn't say Scott Walker in there. Rick Perry did run in 2012, but he was just a terrible presidential candidate. There was all these candidates that would have been solid candidates or serious contenders at one point in time, but they chose to wait, and then they chose to wait at 2016, and they absolutely went nowhere. So, Chris Christie, Pataki, Jindal. There's probably a few others that are escaping my notice at this time. Jeb Bush is actually a really good example. Jeb Bush was not so much his circumstances as the fact that his brother was so hated by the time he left office that the perfect time for Jeb Bush to run was in 2008, possibly even in 2012. But the Bush name was so, had so much toxicity around it for understandable and justifiable reasons that he chose not to run. But there's there's all these opportunities. So none of these people want to wait till 2028 because they don't know what the circumstances are going to be. And they see Trump as weak and they all say that this is my one time to shine. If I wait till 2028, I may never have this opportunity. This is my one opportunity and I want to get in. So while everyone's talking about Trump v. DeSantis as the grand battle, it's really going to be Trump versus a lot of different candidates. People are going to likely get in. Mike Pompeo, he's been telegraphing that for a long time, and it's very clear he's going to jump in. He may be the first to announce after Trump. Larry Hogan wants to get in. Chris Christie wants to get in, so that's 3 besides Trump. Asa Hutchinson wants to get in, which somebody once asked me, he's like, Scott, what do you think about Asa Hutchinson getting in the presidential race? And I was like, Asa Hutchinson would be an idiot to run for president. Like, nobody wants Asa Hutchinson. But, here's the difference between him and... I'm going to think of this way of Asa Hutchinson versus Larry Hogan. Larry Hogan may be someone that obviously Republican primary doesn't want to vote for. Republican primary. He was a Republican governor of a blue state, governed more to the left than a lot of the right would probably prefer, but it was to a blue state. And he could just say, for Larry Hogan, he could say, look, I'm an authentic conservative. You guys should vote for me, even though, I just showed how conservatism could win in a blue state. So that could be his pitch. I don't think it's going to work for Larry Hogan, but I'll get to that in a moment. With Asa Hutchinson, he governed a deep red state like it was a blue state. He's like, I shot down all these widely popular ideas that our legislature pushed forward, whether it was like banning, trans athletes in girls' sports, other things that they tried to do. And I was always anti-Trump. And, I even neutered our Religious Freedom Act way back in 2015. He was never acting. And this is once again a deep red state where he was going against the tide, making it, more liberal. And he's like, yes, I govern as I showed how conservatives can win in one of the reddest states in the union. And it's like, no, that's not an appealing prospect at all. And Asa Hutchinson is old. He is, he doesn't have much charisma. I don't know what his pitch would be. It's like, I ensure there were conservative defeats in a very red state. Like that is just, there's no pitch for Asa Hutchinson. Asa Hutchinson just feels that the fact that liberal media and the mainstream media gives him a lot of praise for standing up against conservatives, that this would make him a strong presidential contender. I don't even, he just like, he's boring, old, no charisma. And like conservatives hate him. He doesn't even have his like record is something that would be terrible to run on in a Republican primary. He'd be running in the same way that someone, I keep bringing up Pataki, but George Pataki was like a very moderate Republican. Obviously, he was governor of New York, and he was running in that in 2016 about how moderate he was. And nobody went for that. And for Asa Hutchinson, he would be running as a super moderate when he was governor of a deep red state. And that's obviously not what he wants. He's the antithesis of someone like Ron DeSantis, who, you know, despite the problems with DeSantis, he is a conservative delivering conservative victories in a battleground state, while Asa Hutchinson is the opposite, as he's delivering conservative defeats in a very red state. So that's something, so that's just no pitch. So that's like somebody, but he's clearly planning on running. He keeps talking about how I hope to be this alternative to Trump and all this thing. It's like, who the hell wants Asa Hutchinson? I don't know, but maybe there's some donors out there for him. Other people who are going to run, Nikki Haley's going to run. One person I'm surprised by is Kristi Noem. Noem is obviously testing the waters. I always thought Noem would be someone to endorse Trump and who thought that her best chances for her political future was trying to be Trump's running mate. But she's instead saying we need to move on to new people. And Noem probably wants to get in. It's funny because a lot of Trump world people advise her. Noem's a complete idiot. She's going to get steamrolled in the primary, but she's going to jump in, which is going to be a very bad political decision for her, but it's a bad political decision for a lot of people. Liz Cheney might get in. I don't know how much that is true. I don't think many of the senators are going to get in. Like, you know, people have always talked about Josh Hawley, Tom Cotton, Ted Cruz, Rubio, Rick Scott, you know, all these people, they clearly want to be president, but I think it's going to be mostly governors or people who are out of office. One, like for Rubio's case and Rick Scott's case is that they already have a Florida candidate. Well, they have two if you count Trump. You know, they already have that Florida infrastructure and establishment backing someone else in Ron DeSantis. So I don't think they're going to jump in. They don't seem as eager to it. And also Rick Scott has had, you know, the 2022 election was supposed to be his like his victory because he was running the RSSC. Hold on. I think I'm the Republican Senate Committee, National Senate Committee. Yeah, I think that the National Republican Senate, NRSC, getting our acronyms mixed up here. And, you know, he was supposed to I showed that we backed all these candidates and we won big, and they did not have the victories they expected. And then he challenged Mitch McConnell for minority leader rather, and he lost that. I don't think Scott has a lot of money. But Scott, I don't think, is coming at it the strongest angle. He may still want to get in the race, but he's coming at it. He really, if you want to look at the biggest losers of 2022, I'd really say he's one of the biggest losers, far more than Trump or anyone. And he doesn't really have that real strong motivation or pedestal to go to launch himself into a presidential run. So I don't know. But once again, there's so many mind-boggling people getting in, like Asa Hutchinson. I think with Hutchinson, you know, he's old. This is literally his only opportunity to run. He thinks that like the mainstream media loves him. Maybe the Republican base wants someone delivering conservative defeats and disappointments in a red state for that to be their presidential nominee. So there's just like people jumping in, like Chris Christie. It's like, I guess he has his youth. Still has his vigor and feels that this may be his time to shine. Who knows? A lot of these people, I just don't think they're going to take off much in the presidential race. But so many people are getting in that feels going to eventually be divided. That support, you know, where there is a substantial amount of Republican voters who don't want to vote for Trump, at least have not come around to it again yet. And if it was just a two-man race, between a hypothetical candidate, I guess how people imagine Ron DeSantis is, it would be very tough for Trump. But the fact is, he's going to have a divided field again, as he did in 2016, with all these people jumping in. Some going to be more threatening than others. Like Pence is going to have a large amount of support, a lot from evangelicals, a lot from donors. He has a lot of name recognition. He's also getting a lot of mainstream media support. He still has a lot, so he has a lot of that connection built in with the Republican base. He's going to get a lot of support. I think Pompeo, strangely, is going to get a certain level of support. How much? I don't think more than 5%, but who knows? Hogan might. I don't know. The thing is like, who may take off? And by taking off, I mean getting more than 5% of support. That's tough to figure out. That's especially tough to figure out with who else run. Actually, and some, like Nikki Haley, might get more than 5% support. Now, somebody who is going to get more than 5% support, who is also planning to run, is, and I said this with like senators, I got to go back to Cotton, because Cotton, I was always certain that he was going to run, no matter how stupid that was. But Cotton, from what I've been told, and like he doesn't want to run. I think he might think it's too divided of a field. Maybe realizes his own political limitations, and he just wants to work more into building his own power within the Senate. That might be smart. He may still get in the race, but there's somebody who's actually going to jump in who probably will get more than 5% of support, and that's Tim Scott, who would be the absolute worst person to be there. No, it's not just because of his race. Some people are like, oh, that's just because Scott's a racist. No, it's not just because of his race. It's because Tim Scott has really championed a lot of these BLM causes. He shot down judicial appointments because they questioned multiculturalism. He pushed through for criminal justice reform. He pushed for the Platinum Plan and all these give-me's to the black community. And he really worked to neuter the Republicans on race. And he would just be, Eddie's like a huge neocon. He'd just be absolutely terrible on a lot of fronts. But unfortunately, he'd be popular because it's like, wow, base black guy. And Republican voters, unfortunately, loved Tim Scott. And I always thought, it's like, I don't think he's going to get in, because I think he would realize he's going to be a strong VP candidate for everyone but Trump. Fortunately, I think the fact that Trump knows he's disloyal and he's subtly attacked Trump, like he did not think that the Mar-a-Lago raid was a bad thing, which I think Trump noticed. I don't think and Trump wants a strong defender for him for running mate. I don't think that he found that in Scott, but pretty much for everyone else, Scott would be a strong VP candidate. But Scott would also be a strong presidential candidate because he's got a lot of support. He's got a huge war chest built up. I think it's close to close to 100 million. And once again, he ran in an uncompetitive state in South Carolina, so he does not have to worry about fending off any challengers there. So that's somebody who would actually take off. And this is somebody that we're trying to think of theoretically who are other possibilities besides Ron DeSantis, who would take up a lot of support. Pence is going to have more than 5% support, probably hovering around 10%. Scott would have more than 5% support. Who else is a matter of contention? I don't think Haley has that type of support anymore. I think her time has faded. Her time to run would have been in 2020, but she would obviously been crushed. So I don't think she's going to be doing too well. Noam's too stupid. I don't think she's not going to work on a national stage. She's really dumb. She doesn't have that type of, she is not a Carrie Lake in terms of her presentation. Most of the candidates, Hogan or Chris Christie could maybe get a surprising amount of support. By surprising amount of support is that they get, they're polling more than, maybe a little bit more than 5%. Maybe someone like someone who's operating the moderate lane could get a lot. But the one thing to keep in mind is that with all these candidates dividing that support base, that means that Ron DeSantis is not going to gain that's taking away support from Ron DeSantis if he jumps in. and when he challenges Trump. And that's going to make it a lot easier for Trump to seal a nomination. Because I don't think, one thing is that people do not see DeSantis as, they like DeSantis, but they do not see him as this formidable candidate that a lot of his conservative fans see him as. That's why all these other people are jumping in. If they saw Ron DeSantis as the best chance to take on Trump, you would not have all these heavy hitters lining up to run in the presidential race. You would not have that at all. You would have now they could at some point say it's a divided field and it's going down to the primaries and they see that Trump's going to win again, that they all, decide to drop out and jump around and coalesce around one person. But I think it's going to be difficult even for that to happen again. But there's a lot of things that are going to be going on in 2024 that are different from 2016. Namely, whether Trump gets indicted, the fact that they'd have to be running against Biden, or whether they might not be running against Biden. There's just so many weird things that could happen in 2024. It's going to be a very chaotic situation. And it's hard to make definite predictions, but I can see how the race is going to be. And so with everyone predicting that Ron DeSantis would easily get in and clobber Trump, you're forgetting the fact that it's going to be a divided field. A lot of people are going to be in there. A lot of these people are going to be wanting to take pot shots at DeSantis because DeSantis is going to be seen as the chief alternative to Trump. But DeSantis is probably going to be one of the last people to enter the race. As DeSantis does not want a head-on challenge against Trump. A lot of people want head-on challenges against Trump. Pompeo wants to challenge Trump. He clearly is wanting that. Hogan wants a direct challenge to Trump. Chris Christie wants to directly challenge Trump. Hutchinson wants to directly challenge Trump. I don't know why. Does he get destroyed? I don't know if Tim Scott does. But so many of these other candidates do. And they're very eager for it. And that does, and they're going to be the first ones to jump in. Now, they could be doing this to weaken up Trump and direct all of Trump's attack. And maybe Trump discredits all these candidates so badly that it creates this huge opening for DeSantis. Like, the reason why DeSantis wants to wait is, one, DeSantis maybe doesn't feel as driven to run. Like, DeSantis still has office. Most of these guys don't have any office, like Pence, Pompeo, Christie, Hutchinson, Haley. A lot of these guys don't have a political position that they are in. Florida governor's a busy job. He's got something else to do. So he could just say, I'm remaining above the fray, and maybe that makes him look good, and he's not responding directly to Trump's attacks, and maybe that makes him more popular with the electorate. That's his base. And also, DeSantis knows that Trump wants a head-on direct challenge from DeSantis so he can lay into him. And DeSantis is worried that by having this direct confrontation with Trump, that it could permanently, divide the party by the time for the 2024 general election, even if DeSantis wins, which I don't think would be a likely scenario, but let's say it could happen. And DeSantis doesn't want that. Also, DeSantis probably feels that Trump may drop out because of all the legal troubles he has, and he may just drop out and leave the field open for all who want to enter. And that time, with all these candidates who have, spent all their time attacking Trump and taking barbs from Trump, that then DeSantis could come in clean of all the attacks, free of all the dirt, and just come in and assume authority in the party. And that's a smart decision. I don't know how it could work. It could work against his favor because, with DeSantis not in the race, that other people could pick favorites within there. I think the one scenario that's most likely is that a lot of these people who are very down on Trump may warm back up to Trump throughout the 2023 presidential cycle when they're seeing him on the campaign trail, when they're realizing that, no, it wasn't entirely his fault that the Republicans lost or did not do as well in the 2022 midterms. And, they come around to accepting Trump again. And this might be an easier task if it's people like Larry Hogan, Asa Hutchinson, Chris Christie, people that Republicans hate more than Trump are the ones making the attacks on Trump. And that may make people more like Trump. And if they feel that he's being persecuted by the federal government, maybe an indictment might help Trump in the midterms, or not in the midterms, but in the primary. A lot of things can happen. And I think the longer, it's smart for DeSantis to wait, but the longer he also carries risks by waiting. And I think that Trump will not want to endorse DeSantis. Also, the fact if he feels that the entire field is hostile towards him and is not going to give him a pardon, no matter his legal troubles, and they're all having this jilted ex-lover attitude towards Trump, which is what they all maintain at the moment. Trump may just go out to the bitter end and want to bring down the whole party with him. And the Republican Party is not knowing how to negotiate. And I thought that if that came down to the primary in that way, that Trump may drop out at some point and endorse somebody he views as a loyal successor. And that person I thought would have been Carrie Lake. But the fact that Carrie Lake lost her governor race, that person's not going to be Carrie Lake. Carrie Lake is probably not going to run for president unless she has an office to to go from to a presidential run. He could still pick Carrie Lake to be his running mate, or it probably would be her or Elise Stefanik. Maybe that could be the case, but I think Carrie Lake's going to run for the Senate in Arizona in 2024 instead. That'd probably be the smarter move for her. But who knows? That all these things are hard to determine guesses at this point in time, considering all the things that could change in 2023 and into early 2024. But the one thing that's certain is that Trump no longer has Carrie Lake to lean back onto if he gets out of legal trouble and he wants someone to be his loyal successor and his attack dog against all these people. At that point, he may, just like has too many legal troubles, is that unless someone's offering him a pardon, or most of the field is offering him a pardon, he may not drop out and he may just want to bring down the whole party as like an act of revenge. So we'll have to see when that happens. But it's smart for DeSantis to wait. As I said, it's smart for DeSantis to wait, but there's risks. And at the time, it may not be seen as just a simple Trump v. DeSantis. And someone else may emerge. Like maybe Tim Scott becomes the favorite anti-Trump, guy as the preferred candidate. And then when DeSantis enters, he no longer has that, fervor that was surrounding him when he first, after election night. And it's also, as I hammer all the problems on DeSantis. He doesn't have the charisma. I don't think he is, he does a lot of good things, but he also, when there is a backlash to some things, like people always want to say that he's strong and will follow through on things when Trump, would just cave immediately. That's not true when you look at the migrant flights, which, he got a little bit of pushback about him. And then he completely hid that he ever did the flights and, just didn't want to didn't even want to bring it up anymore. And no further follow-up flights due to the fact of how much pushback he got from it. Even though he enjoyed the stunt and the support he got from conservative media, he decided no longer to do it, even though everyone was calling it the most effective use of state power in human history. He didn't follow up on it. So there's things about DeSantis. But the one thing that you need to keep in mind is whoever is the challenger to Trump, they're not representing Trumpism without Trump. DeSantis is probably the only person who would represent Trumpism without Trump. But if they win, their support is going to be about restoring the old guard to the party. Now, it may be with some MAGA elements, as seen with Ron DeSantis or others. But really, the people who are going to be in the driver's seat are going to be the same people who were in the driver's seat before Trump took power in 2016. It's going to be Paul Ryan's. It's going to be AEI. It's going to be Heritage Foundation. It's going to be Mitch McConnell or whoever is the, is still the majority leader. All those type of people, or I keep wanting to say majority leader, minority leader. It's going to be the establishment in charge. It's going to be a restoration with Trump gone. Because even if DeSantis became the leader, he would not be as a forceful advocate for Trumpism as an ideology or as the principles as Trump was. I would say this, like, look at this from primaries. Like, people want to complain about Trump's endorsements that he's done even when he was president. That's fine. But he was still willing to back, America First challengers against the establishment, as he did throughout the 2022 primaries. Which, the one disappointment he did was rescinding his endorsement of Mo Brooks, but that was also due to Mo Brooks running a bad campaign. He should have stuck with Mo Brooks anyway, but it is what it is. Besides that, Trump got rid of Liz Cheney. He got rid of Peter Meyer. He got rid of all these terrible never-Trumpers, establishmentites, amnesty supporters. He got rid of them all through his endorsements. And nobody else was doing this. And it's all due to Trump. Like, the reason why Liz Cheney is out of the party is because of Trump. The reason why there was all these great candidates running in the elections in 2022, such as Blake Masters, J.D. Vance, Kerry Lake, was because of Trump. It wasn't just, these candidates would have not won primaries if it wasn't for Trump's endorsement and Trump's support. That is the fact of the matter. And now all of the hatred is towards these Trump candidates, which includes Lake, Masters, Vance. Even though Vance won, Joe Kent, I know some people may have problems with Joe Kent due to his disavowal of Nick Fuentes and other things, but compared to who he's running against, he was still... the person he was running against was even worse, or he defeated in the primary. So people like that. You had these candidates. They don't want any more of those candidates. They want Brian Kemp. They want Chris Sununu. They want Larry Hogan's. They want Asa Hutchinson's. That's who they want to run in these races. The problem isn't just Trump. The problem is Trumpy candidates or America First candidates who are campaigning on issues that they think are not good. Like, oh, you shouldn't be talking about immigration restriction. Oh, you shouldn't be talking about who's committing crime. Oh, you shouldn't be talking about non-interventionism. You shouldn't be talking about any interesting ideas. You shouldn't be exciting the base. You need to be a boring, business first type Republican who's just sitting there going, it's time to lower taxes. It's time to cut regulations. That's it. They want to return the party back to the way it was pre-Trump. They want Paul Ryan seen as the future of the party. They want Paul Ryan seen as the radical of the party, not someone like Blake Masters and not somebody like, Paul Gosar or somebody. They want to just see them as the fringe that they're going to expel at some point in time. And that is what they want the party to be. And, they always talk about, like, we're tired of losing under Trump. Trump did not have disastrous election results at any point since he's been around. Okay, and every election was that he was involved in was supposed to be a disaster. 2016 was supposed to be a blowout. Instead, Republicans won the White House, kept the Senate majority, kept the House majority. Wow. In 2018, they were supposed to lose the Senate majority, lose the House majority by an outstanding margin, and it was supposed to signal to Trump that he should resign. It turned out that Republicans gained seats in the Senate, did pretty well in governor races, and they mitigated some of the disaster in the House. They did lose the House, but it is what it is. 2020 supposed to be another blowout. Instead, they nearly kept the Senate. But, something happened with the Senate runoff, and they gained seats in the House, and they nearly kept the White House, too. 2022, it's the first time with, and Trump's not even on the ballot. It was once again emphasized, Trump's not on the ballot, and they won back the House, they may have had a net gain of 0 seats instead of a net loss of 1. Depending on how the Georgia Senate runoff goes. So all these things happen, and they're all like, these are the worst disasters to ever affect the Republicans. It's like, do you guys remember 2006? Complete disaster for Republicans. They got wiped out. 2008, wiped out again. And Democrats got a near supermajority in the Senate. The results of the 2008 race allowed Democrats to pass Obamacare. It was so bad for Republicans. 2010, they're supposed to come roaring back. They once again had, they did gain some seats in the Senate and they did win back the House, but it was seen as rather disappointing in how they did not do much better. 2012, they were supposed to win the White House. They were like, the economy's shit. Everyone hates Obama. We're going to win back the Senate too. They didn't win back the Senate. They did not win back the Senate. They did not win the White House. They did keep the House. That's it. 2012. And this was all. And in 2014, they finally got some big wins. Finally won back the Senate. Won some House seats. It was the victory that they had been promising for years. It was the victory that they had been promising since 2010. It finally delivered. And that's under the winners, the SMASHMOUTH GOP. I like using the term SMASHMOUTH GOP. Some people are like, what is this term? And they might think like the band Smash Mouth. But Smash Mouth, it was a term I heard a lot growing up watching football. It's like Smash Mouth football. They're playing some Smash Mouth football. And it is like a particular type of offense, which actually is funny enough, even though it's like very grueling type of offense because it emphasizes running a lot. And short passes, if you ever pass at all. It's actually a risk-averse offense because the reason why that they run so much is because passing creates too many risks of bad things happening, turnover, getting sacked. While running the ball, it gives, greater chances of forward progress. So you emphasize running game. So it's actually funny that it's SmashMouth GOP. It's actually, they are risk-averse, but they're trying to be tough and they're winning. And they're just doing things by the books, and it's like very boring play. But it actually creates this like intimidating, like Smash Mouth GOP. It's like, boom, Paul Ryan coming through the floor, coming through the House, and Democrats like, oh no, and it's like, I'm gonna defeat you with respect and civility. They're like, no, our worst nightmare, the Smash Mouth GOP gonna use state power to restore civility. It really would be one of the funny things is like the new right of the GOP. The new right is always like, and whatever called the new right or populist thing, they're so eager to get rid of Trump. But the one thing is that they're, and their eagerness to get rid of Trump is that they're just going to restore the old right back. But the old right will now be like, we're using state power to cut taxes. We're using state power to launch another stupid war. That's like the type of things they'll use, like these populist phrases and rhetoric to argue for the same old shit that they've been arguing for years and years and years. And it's just a restoration. And one thing that has got to be funny with populism and new right types is that they all think they're going to be ruling the roost for like the future. They're the future of the right. They're the future of the GOP. They're going to be determining all these things. But that's not going to be the case because a lot of these institutions and figures became big because there were so few institutions and figures willing to give public support to Trump. And the fact that these people were willing to give public support to Trump elevated their status. But when the entire right is willing to support someone like DeSantis, they're no longer unique. And a lot of these institutions have done nothing to build themselves up to prosper in the future outside of just like making podcasts that no one listens to. Unlike Highly Respected, which tons and tons of people listen to the podcast. I think millions, we may even say. And so these people haven't positioned themselves to, lead the right when a restoration happens and National Review and AEI and all these people are excited for the Republican presidential candidate. There's no need for people like Claremont or these type of people who became, well known and prominent during the Trump years. These people are they're not going to be totally, cast aside, but they're not going to be in a senior roles in a DeSantis administration or a DeSantis-led GOP or whoever becomes the leader of the GOP. It would just be the same people who were prominent back in 2012 restoring to their positions. Think of it as like the Bourbon Restoration after Napoleon. They come back. It's not like the disloyal Bonapartists are the ones in charge. No, the disloyal Bonapartists are cast aside as well. It's like all the Bourbons and all the royalists are the ones in charge again. And that's what would be the same with the Republicans, is like all the cucks would be back in the driver's seat. You may not like the Bourbon restoration metaphor because you're like, wait, the Bourbons are the good guys. Regardless of what your position on that matter is, I think you can understand what I'm trying to say here. And that's part of a sobering thought I think more people need to come to realize, is that without Trump there, the party can very easily, I've been saying this throughout the podcast, but I want to emphasize this. is the party can very much revert back to its normal state. And the unfortunate fact is there's very few politicians to carry on the torch with Trump. There's a lot of guys who say the things that Trump, campaigned on, the America First policies that he promoted. There's a lot of Republicans who stand up for that stuff now, especially in the House. In the Senate, you got people like Josh Hawley and other things. But none of these people are leaders on that front. And even someone like Ron DeSantis, who says a lot of the right things, he is not going to be quite the champion of the America First policies or the type of person to really shake up and push the party in that direction. He is going to be more of a creature of the establishment. I mean, depending on, he's going to be much more beholden to donors than Trump. He's going to be much more beholden to a lot of the Republican infrastructure than Trump. And, he's not going to be the one setting the tone, I guess is a way to say that. He's not going to be the one setting the tone in the way that Trump did. And you could even see this in endorsements. Like, he is never going to buck the establishment and who they want for their candidates. And there's not going to be like challengers who are like, I'm a DeSantis. I mean, there might be. But, there weren't like people, that many cases of people in like the, Bush years who are like, I'm a George W. Bush conservative, in the way that they were saying like they're Trump conservatives in the Trump era. Him endorsing candidates like DeSantis, Josh Hawley, and all these guys who are much more in his mold for open seats. DeSantis probably won't enter in those races, or will just endorse whoever, is the favorite or is favored by McConnell and others. And so he will not have that transformative effect on the party. And, the only thing that will be keeping the America First flag flying high, at least in the mainstream political arena, in terms of like what Republican politicians are thinking and saying, will be Tucker. So that's one white pill to think about, is that they will not return entirely to form with Tucker there, because Tucker, a big difference between now and 2013 is Tucker was not the number one cable news show host, and he was not advocating for nationalist ideas on a regular basis. There was nobody like that back then. Now you have somebody like that, and Republicans have to listen. But there will be, I think, with Trump listens to Tucker more than any other Republican politician, or more so than a lot of other Republican politicians, and probably more so than any potential presidential candidate. He would watch Tucker, and that would change his mind on a lot of issues. He tweeted about South Africa just because Tucker had a segment on it, and countless. He took COVID seriously, even though now people may not like that position because of Tucker. And he remained committed to non-interventionism and foreign policy because of Tucker, too. And I don't think you will have that type of influence on any other Republican presidential candidate, who are potential Republican presidential candidate. So that's something to keep in mind. And I think a lot of people, they're talking about electability, and it's really infuriating to see guys who are like right-wing anons talking about electability and stuff, or like that. It's like, we don't care about we do care about electability, but that's not our chief position. Our chief position is to advocate for our ideas, America First nationalism, and it doesn't fucking matter if what wins elections is something that is completely antithetical to that. That doesn't matter. Who gives a shit if it's someone like George W. Bush or a Paul Ryan type winning elections? Like, that's no victory for us. It's only a victory for us if people who are willing to push forward America First policies, America First ideas, are the ones winning elections. And if it's total cucks winning elections, that is no victory for us. So you should not fall for this electability meme, because that electability meme is just a way to dupe us into supporting terrible candidates like Brian Kemp, or this idiot who ran in Colorado and lost, but everyone's talking about how he's the perfect candidate. He lost by nearly 15 points. He was not that great of a candidate. And, this guy went against Trump. And so they are all obsessed with like electability and winning and stuff. And now that was a big factor in Trump, campaigning in 2016. But at the same time, they're now trying to say winning means voting for boring, business first Republicans and empty suit types who are not going to represent our interests, who are anti-America First, and, just think that we need to talk about cutting entitlements. Like Paul Ryan is already back, like thinking he can tell Republicans what to do after his election, and he's telling them to cut entitlements, which is politically disastrous. Which all these idiots talk about how Trump is toxic. Like cutting entitlements is why Republicans lost in 2012, and why the idea that Republicans were going to get rid of your Social Security and this stuff, that is way politically more disastrous than anything that Trump may be associated with Trump. And I also want to emphasize, Republicans are doing much better on their elections than pre-Trump, pre-Trump era, as I pointed out in 2006 to 2012, except for 2010 where, they won back the House. There's a lot of disappointments, especially in 2012, which is similar year to 2022, but at least in 2022, they at least gained seats in the House, while they may have gained seats in 2012, but they lost the White House, lost the presidential race, did not win back the Senate, and, they were not in a strong position. And it's the same, and they were having disastrous defeats in congressional elections a long time. People are like, this is like a historic defeat. It's like there's like presidential elections, think about like 64 where Republicans got absolutely slaughtered, and Democrats had over 100 seat majority. I think it was way more than that, I think, in the House, and they just had a super majority in the Senate. And, Goldwater at the end still set the standard for what the Republican Party was going to be. It was no longer be a liberal Republican Party in the mold of Nelson Rockefeller. And they followed that path. But, after, elections that weren't even that bad, they're like, we have to work totally to purge like Trumpism from the party. Otherwise, we're never going to win an election again. And, compared to 64, this looked like a great election. And there were other midterm elections that should have been better for Republicans in the past, but, they didn't end up that way. And I think all this is just, an excuse and an opportunity for the establishment to reassert its. I keep saying that, but I think that's just something people need to keep in mind. And so when it comes to Trump v. DeSantis, I can see why people will like DeSantis and that, but you have to understand is DeSantis is going to be the establishment guy in a primary. He is going to be the person that people are going to be supporting, and a lot of the important figures and institutions are going to be supporting, because he will bring back that restoration of the old GOP. And even though the good things he's done as governor, you have to keep that in mind. And turning on Trump is that Trump is going to be the only person who's going to be our guy in the 2024 Republican primary. There's going to be nobody else. For all his flaws and imperfections and stupid decisions, it's just Trump. And you may just want to emphasize, like, no, DeSantis will, once he becomes president, he will tell Paul Singer to fuck off. And so will tell Paul Ryan. And he's going to hire only racist anons from Twitter to run his administration. That's just not going to happen. He's going to hire, that's just not going to happen. But that's what everyone thinks is going to happen. Like, are some of these people who are supporting him online. That's not going to happen for DeSantis. It's going to be a very competitive field to get in DeSantis, because the entire Republican apparatus would support DeSantis, and so would Conservative Inc., and all those people would have priority in staffing his administration. So people are going to complain about Trump's hires. Wait till they see DeSantis or whoever else would get in the administration. And last thought is like somebody else who might get in the primaries, Glenn Youngkin. I guess I should add this because I didn't bring him up. Glenn Youngkin's another person who might run. I don't think he will run, because I think he's going to see how brutal the field is, and he's too Mr. Nice Guy to get in. He does not want to spend his whole time getting savaged by Trump and other candidates that I don't think he will get in. But I just wanted to add that in there because I didn't bring up Youngkin. But going back to the main point of Trump versus DeSantis and how that race would play out, I think it will. Or how the primary is going to field is going to look at this moment. First off, there's something to keep in mind is that the Trump indictment is going to be hanging over the field, whether that's going to drop or not. And depending on when it drops, the fact that Garland appointed a special counsel to do that does indicate they're getting cold feet on actually pursuing an an indictment against Trump, and it's going to take a while. So Trump may win back that support from the base that is upset over the 2022 elections. People have short-term memories. The fact that he's on the campaign trail and making fun of these people that they hate, like Asa Hutchinson and others, like putting out these people that they have right now, like Asa Hutchinson, Larry Hogan, and Chris Christie, is perfect for building Trump's like stature up with the base again. I mean, it's like they're setting him up to win. And so if an indictment happens, that might increase his support. It might diminish his support depending on how the base has stepped back from the 2022 midterms. And so he'll be in there. That primary field will get crowded. I think Trump will raise his stature again. And once he'll be back returning to old form, he'll have these really detestable enemies as his foils in the same way he was able to build him up himself through the humiliating Jeb Bush. He will be able to do that again in 2024 through all these guys that they're trying to throw and gals who they're trying to throw against Trump. And DeSantis is going to be smart and try to wait it out, but he may, wait it out and thinking that it's safe and Trump's still in there and he jumps in. And instead, he's going to be facing a stronger, rebounded Trump who's going to be even more vicious to DeSantis when he jumps in. DeSantis, I think, is running, and from what I'm hearing, he is planning up the apparatus to run. But he may regret that depending on how this goes. I mean, DeSantis is one big hope, and it's a smart bet to make, is that if he waits so long, that Trump has so many legal troubles that Trump may drop out. And DeSantis may be the only guy who hasn't been attacking Trump, may be the only guy and maybe Trump's stance towards DeSantis changes, that Trump may say like, oh, this guy's the one guy nice to me, he hasn't jumped in the race, and I'm going to drop out, but DeSantis promises me a pardon. Maybe I'll just, drop out and let DeSantis run. I don't think that's likely, but, who knows what may happen. And that's how I think the field's gonna play out. But DeSantis's best hope still is that Trump bows out, and due to legal troubles, and he doesn't have to face him head on. If DeSantis faces him head on, especially after Trump has built himself back up in 2023, it's going to be a really difficult job for DeSantis. And DeSantis does not have the charisma to do this. And I think other people, when they see him on a national stage operating, that they will see that he's not the mythical the mythical figure that people have been building up him as. He's a smart politician, but he's a standard politician, and he really can't compete against the force of charisma that is Trump. And he really can't connect to the base that like Trump can. So Trump just needs to get on the campaign trail. I think he'll find his old footing back. I think most people will come back down from the midterms. I think it's being driven by a lot of Republican operators and conservative Inc. apparatchiks and, these type of pundits who've always hated Trump, have always been anti-Trump. Like, the funniest thing is, like, I was a Trump guy back in 2016. A lot of the people saying this never voted for Trump at any point in time, like either in 2016 or 2020. Like, but it's time to move on. Everyone's saying that. Like, I could imagine, like, Jeb Bush saying that. It's like, it's funny with that. But and to the message to us, if you're thinking that, like, I think a lot of people think that the grass is greener on the other side at this point, and they think that nationalism would be better under DeSantis, and we'd have more effective policy under DeSantis. But you really can't trust DeSantis to accomplish these things, and I think the rest of the party and the rest of the conservatism would move back to what it was before, with the only notable exception of Tucker, pushing back against it. It wouldn't be an entire return to form as it was pre-Trump, but it would be more so than if it were Trump at the helm. And that's the reason why I think, there's several reasons why you'd prefer Trump over DeSantis. I think the one is that Trump represents a challenge to the status quo. DeSantis, despite a lot of the good things he's doing, represents a return to the status quo. And you want the status quo to remain challenged rather than for it to be restored and stronger than ever. So those are my thoughts on that. It's a little bit of a ramble. But hopefully you guys got some informative thoughts on this. Of course, I'm going to be talking about this topic a lot for the for up until Highly Respected is canceled, probably. So probably for the next 2 years, we're going to be talking about these topic a lot. I'll be adding other further thoughts, but those are my thoughts on how the Republican primary will shape up. So everyone predicting a Trump versus DeSantis royal matchup. I don't think it's gonna be a much more divided field, and I think a lot of that support is gonna be taken away from DeSantis. And he could win back that support. If all these guys get clobbered by Trump in the first months of the primary, but it's still a very difficult field ahead for DeSantis. And as long as Trump's health stays intact, as long as his legal troubles don't push him out of the race, I still think he's the favorite in this race. But it's going to be a lot more difficult than I think most people imagine before the midterm elections or before election night this year. Now for a change of topic and a change of continent. We're now going to Europe for our next topic. And next topics are going to be pretty quick because we spent so much time ranting about what I think the 2024 primary will be like. So I'm going to go on to some just quick versions of things that I want to speak up on. This one comes from Giorgia Meloni, the new prime minister of Italy. She's in a spat with France over migrant boats. Italy is refusing to take these migrant boats in. Now they're being sent to France. France doesn't want them, and they're in a back and forth. This is simplifying the results. She is delivering one promise and not taking the boats, but we'll see how long this promise holds. But she's had two concerning things. One, this is like a thing that was a big hit on right-wing Twitter, is that she was talking about France and its relationship with the African country of Burkina Faso. Actually, it wasn't just Burkina Faso. It was several African countries, 14 African countries in exact, and saying how France prints out their currency and is taking all their wealth. Meloni's on some Italian talk show talking about this. A lot of their talk shows look like game shows. It's like you're watching like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, but it's like their prime minister. Who Wants to Be a Prime Minister? It's some of European how they do their formats, because they still have the audience there, and maybe it is a type of town hall. Maybe you could say it's like our town halls, but I don't know what is a type of performance. And she's going off on France because they're in this tiffle. And she's like, look at this child minor who's working in Burkina Faso, and this is awful. And they're doing their own colonialism. But what she then ends on like this anti-European colonialism rant on about how instead of exploiting Africa, they should help Africa, and that will mean fewer migrants to Europe. Message on one hand was based in saying that the solution is not to bring Africans to Europe. Okay, everyone can agree with that. And then it's to free Africa of certain Europeans who are exploiting it and let them live off their own resources, which is, well, that's not how the system works. Is that that would essentially it's a saying. It's a kind of a left-wing argument saying that Africa would be incredibly wealthy and being able to live off itself if it wasn't for evil Europeans exploiting it. And I don't know if that's the case. A lot of African countries have declared themselves independent of European influence. Zimbabwe, you can look at Zimbabwe and some other examples like that, and the results have not been pretty. And so they generally have to have Europeans back in there to run things. Even in South Africa, they try to divvy up and have racial wealth redistribution in Africa, but they still rely on whites and Indians to run the economy. And it's the same in a lot of these African countries. So I don't really care about like France taking the resources from Africa, because Africans wouldn't be using these resources as is. It's not like they're like, wow, if we didn't have evil corporations down here, Burkina Faso would be a major world empire. I don't think anyone's going to believe that, but that's like going into this. And so it's like a weird argument. And I always don't like the anti-colonialism for the right, especially this argument. I mean, it is being used in the way that if these resources aren't being extracted from Africa, that they would stay in Africa and able to support these people, so they wouldn't go to Africa. But that's implying that the Africans would use these resources wisely and that they would become first world countries on their own, and these Africans would not try to be coming to Europe. But they would still be trying to come to Europe anyway because, they wouldn't use these resources wisely. There'd probably be a lot of instability and violence in these countries over those resources, and people would just want to be coming to Europe anyway because Europe would still be a nicer alternative than home for a lot of those people. So, especially if Europe is continuing to be welcoming to these migrants. The fact is, going back to I don't know if going back to the point is the right way to say this, but to the overall picture, I did not like this rant. I saw that it really took off, and they're like, this is brilliant because it's really making, instead of Dems are the real racists, it's French are the real racists, and it's like we're really hosing the left as the real colonialists. And it's like colonialism because the extracting of resources and these arguments are used by the left to now demonize the West and to demand reparations and for unlimited immigration to the Western world. And we have to be careful about using these arguments because they would ultimately be supporting our enemies' arguments for destroying our own societies and our own civilization. And I really don't like, attacking another European country for, running these African countries that can't run themselves, and then attacking them for, getting resources from those countries, and then just demanding France, not get resources from these countries and allow Africa to build itself up. I mean, that's just not going to happen. That's just silly talk. But it is like a way of just political rhetoric, is that people use this cheap political rhetoric for just to make their points. I mean, we sort of use that on immigration itself when we're like, immigration hurts low-skilled black labor the most, and you're like, no shit. I mean, but people always use this like immigration is. Some people go into the matter of just saying immigration is racist because of that, and it's obvious why people want low-skilled immigrants to replace, black labor in this country, as it's they view that low-skilled immigrant labor is superior. But people use this arguments to be like, okay, well, like immigration enthusiasts, these evil corporations are the real racists because they're harming the black man who they should be offering a fair wage to do their job, even though they're doing an inferior job to the illegal Guatemalan who just got hired. So I understand those cheap political arguments, but it becomes a little bit dangerous if the way we're viewing this world is just how we can own the libs or own the French and try to paint them as the real racist. This isn't something completely ripped from Republicans, as people, even back into the World War II pre-war era, even the German Empire would use these, like when it was like involved in colonialism, would attack the British and French for how their racist form of colonialism, and this really escalated into the interwar era and into World War II. So it's not something that's entirely new or something that's completely out of left field for the right to be using, but it just strikes me as cringe, and I think we're a little bit too obsessed with cheap talking points is like the way to build policy. I guess it is a way to humiliate France, to tell them to like. If they're calling Italy racist and exploitive of Africans, then it's a way to put them on the back foot. But at the same time, and I understand the rhetorical usage of this, but at the same time, a little bit leery of it. And it probably is coming from the other news from Meloni, is that this week when it was announced that the rockets that were fired into a Polish tractor in Poland were actually Ukrainian, not Russian. And Meloni said, it doesn't matter, Russia's still to blame, and we shouldn't lose track of that. And I'm like, what? And I've said that Meloni, a lot of the reason why she's so fervently pro-Ukraine is to ally herself with Washington against Brussels, and to also keep her protected from the globalist American empire trying to unseat her. And this is why she's so over the top pro Ukraine. And this is fitting with it. But at the same time, I understand, once again, both these things, I understand the utility of why she's doing this, but it doesn't really make me want to support her. And I think that over time, she's an incredibly gifted politician. Even though when she's speaking Italian when she was like talking, I was like, this Italian language, man, not a huge hit of it. We need some more Germanic language here. Man, it's like over time, maybe that's like I'm becoming so bigoted that any non-Germanic language, I'm like, oh God, this is barbarism that I'm listening to. Even with Italian, I shouldn't even be that way. But when maybe it was even spoken in Italian, the way she was speaking it, it made me more cringe even more. But I won't dwell on that aspect. There's a lot of great Italians who listen to this podcast, and we love our Italian Americans. We love our Italian greerheads as well. So we're not going to attack the Italians. No more brothers' wars, as I like to say, on that matter. But it was it just added to the effect of it. So I think Meloni is showing herself as a very capable politician. She's very charismatic, but there is. And it is like really cool that a nationalist government is in control of one of the major Western European countries, but both the clip of her talking about France exploiting Africa and her reaction to the Polish missile strike should, make us even more skeptical of Meloni and what she may do. And I have a feeling there is going to be, a capitulation on her part to the, globalist order in a way that Salvini would have never done. I think Salvini has proved himself, even though he is not. He's involved in the government. I think he's interior minister again. Salvini is way better than Meloni. And I don't know how he's going to get back his popularity against Meloni. Meloni seems to be more charismatic. Well, they're both charismatic, but I think Meloni may just be better at giving these, barn burners on TV than Salvini. But Salvini clearly is a superior Italian politician to Meloni. And I think these incidents need to make us a little bit more cautious and skeptical of her than people were before. I've always maintained that position, even when I've, defended her, or not defended, but rationalize her stance on Ukraine, but it does bear in mind that she could turn out to be worse than we expected, or far worse than she expected. But you shouldn't get your hopes up too high for Meloni, even though she is still capable of doing good things, as she is doing now with this or the stalemate over the migrant ships. But we'll have to see. I would just say that the video clip may be cringe, and her continuing to blame Russia in the face of truth. I just don't like, I really don't like politicians who lie or speak obvious falsehoods. Ukraine used the missile strike in a way to clearly draw in NATO into the conflict, which they've been trying to do more directly into the conflict, what they've been trying to do since the beginning of the war. And Ukraine being responsible for it and not apologizing, and then these leaders being like, well, Russia's still at fault. It's like, it's entirely idiotic for that to be done. So I just, somebody saying that is always going to make me lose respect for that politician. So both things made me lose respect for Meloni. Not like I'm the most important person that Meloni needs to worry about as Italian prime minister, but I think for a Western audience, for us, as we're seeing this from afar and taking examples of what type of leaders we should want for America and for ourselves, I think it does provide a lesson of what not to do and how far you should not go in pursuit of power, in pursuit of cozying up to Washington, D.C., which she's trying to do with the Russian statement. And so that's it for the normal topics. Now on to our Cognitive Elite question. As a reminder, you too can get the power to ask me questions if you sign up for the Cognitive Elite option at Highly Respected Substack, and that's at highly-respected.substack.com. And if you haven't already, make sure to sign up for the IQ supplements if you haven't. This question comes from Joe. He asks, Scott, do you think Kevin McCarthy will be the next House Speaker? The answer, short answer is yes. I think he will be. I think it's been really like the establishment strikes back after the election. Is like Mitch McConnell easily won majority leader, or I keep wanting to call him majority leader, Senate GOP leader again. McCarthy won by a pretty sizable margin to be the next House Speaker. Once again, there was like 31 votes, I think, was the number that voted against him. But I don't know who else they're going to vote for. They're going to try something. I mean, the Republican majority, it's only going to be by like at most, I think, 4 seats. So it's going to be a very thin majority. And those 4 people may have deciding factor, but I don't think they have an alternative yet. But we'll see. I think that they'll eventually come around. I think McCarthy will just make concessions to a lot of the rabble-rousers, such as Andy Biggs and others, and House Freedom Caucus. I think House Freedom Caucus is holding out their votes to demand concessions from McCarthy. McCarthy will probably give them concessions and he'll be House Speaker. I don't think there's anyone. I mean, McCarthy and McConnell and McDaniel all deserve blame for the elections. I mean, McCarthy invested millions in these never Trump candidates who voted for Trump's impeachment. And a lot of them lost to, great candidates who were much better than them. And he with his super PAC, and he was a little bit. He was better than McConnell. McConnell, ensured that hardly any money went to Blake Masters and some other good candidates. But those people, but he also, they still won, and a win is a win. A win is not a win for McConnell. McConnell should have not been re-picked as majority leader, but his alternative was also a loser from this election was Rick Scott, or once again, I always keep calling him minority leader. But his only alternative was Rick Scott, who was also a big loser from the election. So it was like hard to, no one else challenged him. And I think with McCarthy, I don't think there's actually a serious challenger against him either. But we'll see. We'll see. Maybe there could be, I think House Freedom Caucus is just going to try to wring concessions out of him. They will, threaten that they're not going to vote for him. McCarthy will do something that they want, and then they'll all vote for McCarthy, and that will be it. And he will probably be the House Speaker. I don't know who else they'd want I could overturn, because, it's just the House Freedom Caucus, and there are moderate Republicans who are threatening to cross over to Democrats to vote for a moderate Democrat. I don't know how serious of a threat that'll work, but I think it's going to be mostly theater. That's my prediction. But a lot of my predictions have been wrong lately. So maybe my prediction is like, wow, it's not, somebody else's House Speaker. Totally wrong about Kevin McCarthy, but I think from this perspective, yeah. It's just really the House Freedom Caucus that doesn't want to vote for him. Everyone else is like, no one else wants to really challenge McCarthy outside of the House Freedom Caucus. The House Freedom Caucus can't get more, than their own caucus to vote for somebody else. So they'll be at an impasse. They'll figure out that impasse, and McCarthy will be House Speaker. But they'll allow for like a few people to cast votes against him. Maybe 3 or 1, maybe just one person, depending on how large their majority is. So we'll see how that is. But that's it for today's podcast. Ending on that note of hopefully there were some white pills there. I think on the one thing to keep in mind is that I'm very optimistic about Trump's campaign. I'm very optimistic about it restoring a lot of energy and a lot of positive energy to us and a lot of optimism for us. And I think him tearing down these horrible establishment types like Asa Hutchinson is really going to be exciting and good content. And really, center us about what we're about. And I'm optimistic that Trump will return back to 2016 form and be advocating for a lot of positions that no one else in the Republican Party is. He did talk a lot about anti-white racism on the campaign trail after his presidency. And I think we're going to be hearing a lot more from Trump on that. and when he's running for president, which no other Republican is going to talk about, but they may talk about if Trump's talking about that. So there's a lot of things to look forward to after the disappointing midterms. It's not all hopeless. Just look to Trump's 2024 run. It's going to be great content regardless. He'll at least attack and humiliate a lot of terrible Republicans in the process. So that's something to look forward to. So that is it for today's episode. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully you guys have a wonderful and happy Thanksgiving later this week. I know I am. And so to you and your family, happy Thanksgiving. And until next time, stay respected.